Hello, this is Public Advocate, and I'm Shirley Graves. This is our pre-election show, and I have a Republican and a Democrat here at the table, and we're going to discuss the candidates and the issues, and some of the issues nationwide also while we're talking about it. I have Greg Brockbank, who is a Democrat, and Jack Wilkinson, who is a Republican. And Greg has is an attorney with Marin Law Center, and he's been 22 years in elected office here with Democrat Central Committee and City Council and College of Marin Board. I'm going to let him tell you a little bit more about that. And I have Jack Wilkinson, who is a realtor and broker, and with Bradley Commercial Real Estate.
Correct.
And thank you. And he's been a representative on the Republican Central Committee.
Treasurer currently, are you not?
Yes.
I'm treasurer. That's
right.
great.
Well, Jack, why don't you tell us a little bit more detail about what you do and your interest in the political scene here?
Well, you mentioned I'm a Republican, which means I believe in less government, better. I take Thomas Jefferson, that government governs best that governs least, and I firmly believe that. I've been a realtor for it'll be 40 years next year, president of the Marin Association of Realtors twice, and I'm proud to say I was Realtor of the Year for 2015, and I've served on various committees with the Marin Association of Realtors over the past 35 years. I'm actually chair of almost all the committees. Presently serve on the Governmental Relations Committee, which deals with private property issues that negatively impact, or positively, either way, but private property is, as you would guess, extremely important both to realtors and to the country itself. It's the basis of freedom of any republic.
And Greg Brockbank is going to tell us a little bit more about his background, his activities.
Well, I've been 32 years as a civic and political activist. The last half of that, as you mentioned, as the owner and operator of Marin Law Center. I've just been selected on the slate to serve on the board of directors for the Marin County Bar Association. I've served on way too many boards to count, 40 or 50, but I'm currently trying to limit myself to a few. But I've been on the Democratic Central Committee of Marin for over 30 years and very active, immediate past president, and continue to do that because I'm very passionate about it. And thank you, Jack, for mentioning your philosophy about less government. On the surface, that sounds very appealing, but what I worry about is that as the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, we have a bigger and bigger problem. And I think one of the roles of government, the Democrats believe generally, I think, is to level the playing field.
You mean redistribute wealth?
I prefer level the playing field.
Yeah, but let's deal with facts. You want to take money, you play Robin Hood, take money from one class of people, give it to another.
Leveling playing field is admittedly a simplistic description, but so is redistributing wealth.
No,
it is
not.
true.
The money goes to you, and you decide where it goes.
Well,
you tax money and then redistribute it.
I think that has to be done periodically. Do you deny that if we didn't do that ever at all in any fashion, what are progressive income taxes? What are social services if not redistribution of income? If we didn't do that at all, the rich got richer and richer and richer, and the poor got poorer and poorer, we'd have a revolution. That's not a good thing.
Well, I don't know. I think we're headed that way right now. An awful lot of poor people and an awful lot of people working for government. 47% of the people in this country are getting some kind of government assistance. That's a lot of people getting money from the government. Now, I think government should serve as a safety net. And I don't want to see anybody starving in the streets. And we have some very good programs to take care of that. I don't want to see the soup kitchens that we had and the soup lines that we had in the 30s. People that need help should get help, and I'm all for that. But I hate the fact that it's set up that people can game the system.
I agree.
And the problem comes from the bureaucracies that are created by government. A bureaucrat has one reason to exist, and that's to create his power.
Let's reduce bureaucracy and have more efficient public services.
And the problem, well, it's hard to have efficiency in
hard.
public services because you've got money that's there to be taken and redistributed. And part of the biggest problem with most of what any government agency does, either side, is they get power by giving money away to their favorite groups. And you can't vote against Santa Claus. And therein lies the biggest problem that we have.
You have a good point. I read just the other day an article about a guaranteed annual income.
That's a
At first I thought that's
idea.
a terrible idea because you're just giving them money for nothing. However, the cost of overhead and bureaucracy and patronage and political power would be eliminated. And you could actually give people more money than social services are now giving, which costs a fortune to give away that money because, as you point out, it's inefficient. So Alaska already has that. It's called the permanent fund or something, where every year.
Because they have oil income. That's
Right,
where they
right.
get their money.
But there's several
Where are
other-
we going to get it on the rest of the states? From taxation.
Several, not necessarily raising taxes. How about if you start redistributing some of the money that now goes into social services and just give people an annual income? Some or many or most might get more income with less bureaucracy. I think you'd favor that.
I have just viscerally, I have a problem against guaranteeing anybody an income by just being alive. The very fact, we were talking earlier, we had paper routes. I started working when I was 12 years old. Newspaper routes, paper corners, gas station, cutting lawns. That's just what you did. And it's real, yeah, we're old guys. You know, I look at my grandson, it's very hard for him to find work for teenagers now. So when you provide people sustenance for nothing, it takes away from the drive, the inner human drive to create something. I don't know the answer, Greg, but it really concerns me that we just guarantee that people will get something for nothing.
I'm not sure I support it either, but the idea that housing prices are, especially here in California, especially here in Bay Area, especially here in Marin, are rising so fast that people at minimum wage can't possibly afford those housing rates. If you gave everybody a minimum wage, that's not enough to live on, but it's enough to maybe ease the cost of their housing, which would otherwise be unaffordable.
Well, why is housing so expensive here?
We need more of it. We would agree on that.
But why is it expensive? But where are we going to put it?
Well, it's...
Let me give you some numbers, Greg. Let's look at Marin County. One of 7 climate-wise places on the whole planet that has the weather patterns that we have. So we're limited right there. The Bay Area itself is a beautiful place to live.
We're very blessed.
We live in a state that's the 5th largest economy in the world, and frankly, money falls off the table, and you kind of walk down the street and you'll find money. Now, not literally, but you know what I mean.
Homeless people might not agree with that, but okay.
No, there's a lot of money here. There's a lot of money here.
If you know where to uncover.
We're living next to one of the most vibrant cities, tourist attractions, and a beautiful place. Marin County has 540 square miles. 80% of that land is open space, whether it be a city park, a state park, a county park, or the GGNRA or the MMWD. Of the remaining 20%, 19% is already developed. There's no place left to build.
I agree.
Most of it's on either side of Highway 101, which isn't big enough to handle the traffic we have right now. Hopefully the SMART train will alleviate some of it. We'll have to wait and see. Yeah, well, we don't know yet.
We don't know.
So we have 1% of 540 square miles is 5.4 miles, which turns into 3,500 acres. Now, ABAG has said you can have a density of 23 units per acre. That's about 79,000 homes. Now, don't get wrapped up into math.
Wow.
You can just sit down and figure it out. But the fact is, where are we going to build them?
That assumes the only place we can develop is currently undeveloped land. Why not redevelop already developed land? Downtown Santa Fe, downtown Novato, downtown, all kinds of places have a whole lot of places that are dedicated to a whole lot of parking. Parking will become a lot less necessary in the next decade or two with the advent of self-driving cars. We can use some of those parking lots to build much needed housing. The statistics I've seen are equally staggering about how California needs 170,000 housing units a year just to keep up, and we're doing about 100,000, right? Or it might be 70,000 or whatever. We're falling way behind, and Marin is a good example of that. The further behind we fall in building the houses we need, the higher the prices go up. And that's why we have 70,000 people coming in to work in Marin every day, because they can't afford the housing here, but we have the jobs for them here.
Look at the rent. I read in the paper about there's somebody was something having trouble with their rent or something. It was like $2,900 a month for a studio apartment or something.
I know. It's at the average.
I don't believe it. I'd be living in the street.
Average apartment rent is $2,500 a month. Average single-family home rental is $5,000 a month. And you know these figures probably better than I do, Jack. And the average single-family home is past $1 million a year or two ago, didn't it?
Yeah.
To buy one.
I'm not disputing any of those. Those are facts. How do we solve the problem?
Yeah.
One of the problems we have, and I think there's going to be some change. You mentioned self-driving cars. That will reduce the need for parking. I don't know that it'll reduce the trips because the same number of people are going to want to go the same number of places.
Now, how would that reduce the parking? Did
Instead
you
of-
tell your car to go somewhere else?
Yes. Well, no, instead of driving your car and parking it there, somebody takes you there and then it goes and takes somebody else somewhere, that car never parks.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh my goodness.
It's going to be great to get rid of the parking. But how do we solve the problem now?
Of too many trips. I agree.
You know,
I think I'm a little nervous about what Jerry Brown wants to do about, sometimes it was called a year or two ago, development by right, meaning if you have a proposal for a housing project and it meets all the zoning requirements, you get automatically approved. Well, wait a minute, what about the role of local government approval? What about CEQA and government and environmental approval? I'd hate to see that fall by the wayside. So,
Well,
much as I like
I
more housing.
happen to agree with you on that, Greg. I don't like the state mandating what local communities are going to do. Fairfax is a case in point. All the people running for city council in Fairfax are very concerned about external demands on their property. Now, on the other hand, there's one of those people running that says he wants the wall property, which is the ridge line above the market on Sir Francis Drake.
Developed?
No, he doesn't want it developed. But the guy who owns the property, he has a right to develop
Yeah,
it. Who's going to pay for it?
Right. Good point.
I live in the Santa Margarita Valley, Terra Linda, and we have hills on all sides. In the early 1970s, people started to build on the hill. Terra Linda, where I live, was developed in the mid-50s. They started to build on the hills. The people in the valley got upset, said, wait, we don't want people looking down on us. They floated a bond issue and bought those hills. They're open space, which is great for me. I look out my window and I see hills. I love it. Somebody has to pay for it. So who pays for the private property that you're going to take
I
out
agree.
of circulation?
Well, I'm not taking out.
Oh, no, I'm not saying you are, Greg.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not
proposing.
saying anything.
I just think,
against you.
in addition to the admittedly limited open space available for development, which is almost non-existent, I'm just suggesting that you can redevelop. In fact, there have been proposals in the legislature to reinstitute, including a major candidate for governor, reinstitute the redevelopment agencies, which I think were wrongly canceled. It was a very valuable program to help build affordable housing, but they canceled it a few years ago. Now, if you redevelop areas of downtown, I think you can take a gas station and a car auto stereo alarm installer or whatever, not to be specific, but I'm just thinking of a block in Santa Fe where right across from a 3 or 4 story Santa Fe corporate center, I guess it's Bio Marin, where you could have typical 2 or 3 or even 4 story, there's some 5 or 6 story buildings. I happen to work on the top floor of an 8 story building in Santa Fe. I love it, the only one in Marin, the tallest one by far. But you could redevelop and have typical retail on the ground floor, which provides sales tax, what the city needs, and retail, what the people want. And you have housing on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th floor. That's what we need, more housing units of all types,
Fine.
all over the place.
Why don't we do that?
It should be, and it is feasible. I can name, I always say this, I can name 3, all the people screaming about 20 versus 30 units per acre, I think is a joke. I can name 3 developments in downtown Santa Fe alone, one from a decade or 2 ago, one from 2 or 3 decades ago, one from 3 or 4 decades ago. All are 80 units on 1 acre. No one has ever complained about any of them ever. There's Marin Commons behind Whole Foods, Santa Fe Commons, excuse me. One is Centertown, right between 2nd and 3rd and C and D, I think, and the other is Lone Palm across the street from Centertown. From different decades, they're all perfectly good, so you can build 80 units an acre of housing in downtown
If you
Santa
go
Fe.
up. And one of the
Right.
one of the
3
issues.
units, 3 stories, 4 stories.
Yeah, but one of the issues we have here is the height limitation. Why not build high rises in places where they don't
Not wind cup. That's excessive, it's ugly, and it's not in an appropriate location. But that's what everybody's afraid.
It
That's
would
why I
have
said
worked
no
fine
housing, no housing.
if they had the parking. To build something where people cannot park their cars and say, we're going to change public policy, but not policy, we're just going to force you not to drive. I'm sorry, but
That's a bit of a jump. The only place where I thought that was maybe reasonable is a couple of years ago they were proposing to build in place of the Whistle Stop a 5-6 story building,
Oh,
mostly
right.
senior units,
Right.
and require them not to have any cars. Well, if you're senior, like 60s and 70-year-olds probably drive, but if you're 80 or 90, maybe you don't. Maybe you're going to get around walking a few blocks, or Whistle Stop vans, or the bus, or the Smart Station. You can get by without a car, and if you only allow people in that one unit right next to the Smart Station, that might work. But
if it's their choice.
if it's their choice, well, they don't have to live there. But if
That's their choice.
yeah, exactly. Now, I'm not saying that all housing units that should be built should have no parking. Of course, you're going to need parking for most units, most of the time, for most people. So parking is an issue.
downtown San Rafael, the second floor of all the businesses on 4th Street used to, and probably many of them are still apartments up there.
Yeah,
living
they are.
units,
A few.
That was, you know, at the turn of the century, in fact, throughout history, retail on the floor
Right.
and living units above. And then somewhere along the line in the 60s and 50s and 60s, we got away from that.
Yeah.
And we build neighborhood subdivisions of single-family homes. And you know, most of us live in those, and most of us like those. But it's got away from the...
That isn't what changed it. It was the zoning against having housing above retail. And you look at places like downtown San Francisco. What happens at San Francisco? You go down there, there's nobody around. Because a lot of the living units that were at the turn of the century there are gone. They're just
Really?
off. They're
Oh,
just
they don't do
office
that
buildings.
anymore in San Francisco? Have the living units above the businesses?
They don't build them anymore.
Oh, yeah?
They stopped building it.
Well,
But
this
they-
is a wonderful discussion. It's not even partisan, and we should both be appointed to an urban advisory council, don't you
Right.
think? But let's talk about
I'll
local
make a
races,
note
which
of
is what we're
that.
here for,
Yes,
and then maybe
let's-
talk about what's
let's,
happening in the White House. Anything happening in the White House? There's always something
Oh
happening in the White
dear,
House.
oh dear.
But you mentioned the Fairfax Town Council. Let me give a 1-minute overview, because I've been following this for 20, 30 years, and there are 11 cities in Marin. 8 of them traditionally have had their elections in November of odd-numbered years. This is November of an odd-numbered year coming up. However, they changed the rules a year or two ago. So all the cities and all the school districts and all the special districts are going to have to move their elections from odd-numbered years to even-numbered years
Yeah.
over the course of several years. This is the first year the change is starting to take effect, and 2 cities did in fact make that move already, Mill Valley and Corte Madera. No election this fall. Of the other 5, 6,
Then that means they let their council person or whatever serve an extra year.
sometimes an extra year, sometimes 1 year less. It's a little controversial. There's pros and cons to each. But that leaves most of the cities still having their elections this fall. But most of the school districts moved. Most of the special districts moved. So we've only got these city council races. And as usual, 2 of the city council races, that's about average, do not have a race. They did not have more people filed to run than there were people running. In fact, all the incumbents run for re-election. No one wants to challenge them. It happened in Larkspur, although they're on the ballot because there's a special tax measure, and San Rafael, for the second time in a row, not on the ballot. No challengers to the incumbents. That's very unusual, especially in San Rafael. But that leaves still 5 with races. Fairfax has 6 candidates for 3 seats, including 2 incumbents and 4 new candidates. I don't want to call them challengers unless they're running against incumbents, all incumbents. There's a vacant seat there because an incumbent stepped down. Novato has both incumbents running for re-election, Denise Athis and Pat Eklund, and 1 challenger, Kevin Morrison. San Anselmo also had an incumbent step down, so there's 3 seats, but only 2 incumbents running for re-election, and there's 3 new candidates. Now, Sausalito and Tiburon are both special cases. Sausalito has never had an election, at least in years or decades, on odd-numbered years, but they had a vacancy, they had a resignation early this year.
Yeah.
Usually when you have a resignation or somebody dies in office, the council appoints a replacement. And sure enough, they tried to do that. They advertised. They got like 13 candidates. They interviewed them all, got down to 5 finalists, and the council split 2-2. So they couldn't make a decision, so they threw it open to a special election. And sure enough, there are 3 people running for that 1 empty seat, one of whom is aligned with one faction of 2, another is aligned with the other faction of 2, and the other, well, how does that play in? It's a tough one.
You know, in addition to your discussion, I looked down the list of all of the councils and the people running, and their political party, every one of them is a Democrat except one.
Sausalito. Bill Werner, do you know him, Jack?
No.
Me neither. He's one of the 3 candidates in Sausalito I just mentioned. The final one, Tiburon, similarly had 2 resignations. That's extremely unusual. So they decided, they have actually appointed 2 replacements, but then they decided also to throw it open to the voters so they could because we appointed 2 replacements. We want to open it up to the people to decide. So
Yeah.
both those 2 appointed replacements, Holly Thayer and David Kulik, just been in office a few months, appointed, are running for a full term, or the rest of the term, this November, along with a new candidate, Jack Ryan. So that's why we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 city council races, 2 of which are caused by vacancies, and no school district races. 2 tiny ones weren't challenged. A few special community service district races, 2 of which actually have contests. Marin City is often a contested race,
And Muir Beach.
and this one is 7 candidates for 3 seats in Marin City, and Muir Beach has 3 incumbents running for re-election and 3 former incumbents running to
wow.
replace. That's kind of an odd one, but
Yeah.
it's so tiny. I heard they had a candidates forum the other day. There's only 150 voters in the entire district. 80 of them showed up to this candidates forum.
In your beat?
Yes. Now, that isn't the most pure democracy. I don't know what it is.
It is.
So that race is going to be decided in that one candidates forum.
And I find this very interesting. I've read through all these things, all these biographs that the candidates put out. Most of them, they all say the same thing. We're going to do better for this. The question becomes down to the local voters. Do you really believe them? And do they really mean it? And we certainly can't tell from what little bit that we've read here. All of them, I only have one issue with one, and that's a guy that seems to want to make a private property owner conform to what the town needs without paying for his property. It's similar to what happened to Tony Silvera when, you remember this a few years ago when that came up, we wanted to develop it, and everybody became a stakeholder, and there were all these meetings that were running, and the drivers got to come in and say, well, they don't want to lose their views across that open space. I'm sorry, but you're driving on the highway, you don't want to lose your view. It does not make you a stakeholder. But
Tony Silvera sued and won, didn't he? Or got a settlement at least?
he got a settlement, but
Okay.
the land is still vacant. He didn't get he should have sold it in the 70s when he could have gotten a bunch of money. But
Every campaign consultant will tell you that the most valuable single thing you can do is put in a ballot statement. It costs a few $100s. For the College of Marin, countywide, it was $1,300 or something. Jack knows he ran for that, and I ran
and
for
it
that.
was well worth the
You've run
money.
for it. I remember
It
you
was,
telling me how much yours
but I
was,
agree
yeah.
with you that you can look at 5 candidates' ballot statements, and it doesn't really tell you how to run. They're all saying mom and apple pie, and yes.
They're all saying
Yeah.
the same thing. You got to live in the community.
Yes.
And you got to talk to the people.
And maybe watch a candidates forum. You don't have to go to one, although that'd be nice. But you can watch them on TV. The League of Women Voters is doing. Check out the League of Women Voters websites. I just came from a meeting today. They're filming one, sometimes more than one, sometimes several in each community. So there are candidates forums to watch. And if they're really good, the moderator or even the other candidates will pin each other down. So, well, how do you differ? Well, what do you feel about this? Or you said in your campaign flyer or your website this. Do you really? What about that? You really mean that? I feel differently. There are differences of views. So I don't know what you think. Fairfax has 2 incumbents running for re-election who I think will probably win, Barbara Kohler and John Reed. That leaves 4 other candidates for the final 3rd seat that fall into 2 camps. Bruce Ackerman and Cindy Swift are both planning commissioners, and I like them a lot. And the other 2 are, if I might call them, Charles Cornwell and Deborah Benson, sort of anti-housing folks. Fairfax, as you pointed out before the camera started rolling, has been kind of a hotbed of controversy over housing. And so it's really split the community.
What's interesting to me about Fairfax is my history with Fairfax. When I was a kid, that's where you went for sunshine. I grew up in the southwest portion of San Francisco, which starting in June when school gets out turns gray and foggy.
Yeah.
And is that way until the end of August when school starts and the sun comes out.
Hey, it's summertime, I want some sun. Where do you go? Fairfax.
So June, July, and August, you spent your summer driving to Fairfax and the Marin Town and Country Club.
Yes.
Now that land has been lying fallow since, 73 or 74? A long, long time, which I don't really know the internal politics out there. It's changed ownership twice, I know.
I've met the owner a couple times. Seems like a nice guy, and I wish they could build some housing they could all agree on, but they can't all agree on it.
They've got a traffic problem, and therein lies the whole problem with Fairfax and West Marin. You remember when the county redid its general plan in 72, a lot of people wanted to develop West Marin. We have a big problem. How do you get from here to there? We only have one. We're the only county in the United States that only has one road through it. That's Highway 101. Mm-hmm. If you get stuck at one end of the county, you can't get to the other end. Oh, yeah, you can go Highway 1, but that's not a convenient thing to do. It's a 2-lane road. So how do you get from Central Marin to West Marin? You go Lucas Valley Road, or you go over Panoramic.
Or Sir Francis Drake.
Or Sir Francis Drake. And Sir Francis Drake is a 2-lane road.
Yeah, no, they're all bad, and I agree with you. The traffic has always been at or near the top of everyone's list of favorite major issues. And it's getting worse in part because there's a lot more cars per house than there were 20, 30, 40 years ago when we grew up. And there's also more and more people coming into the county to work, 70,000 people a day.
Right. And where are we going to move these cars down these roads? Where are we going to put the people? And then I always have this one concern: water. We only have those reservoirs. We have no other source. Well, we did vote to have the pipeline in 95.
Briefly. A year.
No, we voted for it. It's just that it was turned down.
You're talking about temporary pipeline over the Richmond Bridge or the
No,
pipeline from Sonoma?
From Sonoma.
We still have that.
Yeah,
Some
but
of our water comes from that.
MMWD have kept pushing it aside. One particular guy that ran that kept denying the voters the ability to build that. The Bug and Bunny people would show up their fishes and say, no, we can't have this, and it never went ahead. The problem is the water. No matter where we get it, there's just so much water, and we're getting away from having any dams. We're not building any more dams to store any more water. So, it's a real concern.
It is, and it comes and goes because we'll have a major drought like we did for 4 or 5 years until this last winter, and people conserve, and we use less and less water. Suddenly we got plenty of water. But then the drought's over, people start using more and more water, we have a major problem. The water districts will tell you, Marin Municipal and Novato, which covers about 90-something% of the county, that, we have plenty of water to cover all foreseeable growth for the next 5 or 10 years. It's not a very secure supply. 5, 10, 15, 20% sometimes comes from Sonoma, and they can cut us off at any time. If there's a big drought for 4, 5, 6 years, or very low rain, and we're not going to get that water.
Well, that's why we have to think ahead. You start drinking tomorrow's water today, you've got a problem if tomorrow goes dry. So I'm a conservative. I want to make sure that I have water. I'm going to not start using tomorrow's water today.
It's certainly a good point, and there's no good answer to it other than we got to keep conserving, maybe conserve even more, even though Marin is growing in population very slowly, and we're building very few housing units. That's one of the problems why housing.
Our population, when I got into real estate, was I think 248,000. It's now what, 252,000? Over a 40-year period.
That's very slow. Well,
That's
it's not
not
quite that
much
slow,
growth.
but it's very slow. It's 248 to 252.
They're 253. What is the population now? Around 252,
Yeah, that's what everybody says.
253,000.
Yeah.
Wow.
A couple of things did happen, and I want to bring these up because according to most general studies back in the 90s, a regional shopping center, about 1 million square feet, required a population of 250,000. We had Northgate, which was 800 and some odd thousand square feet, regional shopping center. And then along comes a guy named Hahn wants to build the Village across from town center, which had fallen into disrepute. And they wanted to build up in Novato. And I'm thinking, how is this going to work? Well, everybody wanted to do it. They did it, and they're still thriving. Retail is going away.
But we went through a golden age of a few decades where Marin got very wealthy and we bought a lot of stuff. So good thing we had those malls.
And now the golden age may be coming to an end. So it's for a retailer. I mean, there's still a lot of money.
I agree.
I look at what online shopping has done to retail. I walked through Northgate Mall the other day. An awful lot of empty stores in there.
I've read that, yes, that the people are just picking out everything over their computer.
And they say Sears may not last, and Kohl's may not last. I don't even know about Macy's. And these are their anchor stores. And when they went through a remodel 6, 8 years ago, 10 maybe, I just gotten on the council, they actually reduced the size of the mall. But they had the right to regrow it. Now they're talking about maybe building some housing there, maybe build another parking lot and part of the.
Well, see, therein lies part of the response to you. Sears owns their own building, and so does Macy's. They're not owned by the owner of the shopping center.
And they have a veto of any development rights.
They do. Now, Sears is going to be out of business in a few years, and that makes me sad.
Me too.
From Chicago, we're the home of Sears. And I grew up. My dad worked for
too.
Sears for a little bit part-time back in the early 50s. It just bought stuff, but it lost its way, and it's going to be gone. I don't know how many years.
Can't
but it's
compete with the
gonna be gone.
Walmarts and the Targets and the others that.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
But it's going to be gone. So the question becomes, what is going to happen to that land? Sears is going to have to divest itself of the property. It's going to need the money for other things. Will San Rafael and will the people that live around it accept it? Because it's still local.
It's a very good question. I think they just did a traffic study a few years ago, as called for in their original permit to do that remodeling about 10 years ago. A traffic study to anticipate the possibility of building housing there. And there's not really that many houses nearby that might object, but we'll see. It'll be an interesting controversy, and it'll definitely be a controversy in the next few years.
Well, there's a good separation between the houses that are there.
Yeah,
It's a big, wide road, so it wouldn't be a
I used to live
big
a
impact.
few blocks from there. Let's talk about some of the other council races. We talked about Fairfax briefly. Let's talk about Novato, because it's a very touchy, interesting one. I'd just like to say a few words about Denise Athos, and maybe you could say a few words about Pat Eklund, that I know who I know you're fond of, and I am too. But Denise Athos, I've gotten to know in the 8 years since she's elected. In fact, I like to think we've become pretty close friends. And I went to a campaign of hers, event of hers the other day. And I think she's terrific. She's not only the current mayor, everybody seems to love her. She is a current realtor, a very active and successful realtor.
She is.
And she has done a great job. I think she's articulate, bright, charismatic, warm, responsive, all the good things you want a local elected official to be, not just in Nevada, not just in Marin, but throughout the region. She was the chair of the North Bay Division of the League of California Cities. So she should be a slam dunk winner, and I think she will be. Now, Pat Eklund, I'd love to hear your opinion on. She looks good on paper. She sounds good personally. She has great credentials. She's been doing this a long time, 28 years. She's very strong. She's a good politician. She walks. She's nearly always a top vote getter. I think 7 of her 8 races, or 6 out of her 7 races, she's been the top vote getter. But she's also controversial. Why?
Well, I don't see the controversy about Pat. I first met Pat in 2002 when I was president of the association that year. And we discussed housing, we discussed some of the problems. She's very open and she's got a very logical mind. She thinks in terms of what solves the problem. Not here's the solution, how do we make it fit? Here's the problem, how do we fix it? I talked to her a couple of weeks ago, and she had this great idea. Do you know where South Park is in San Francisco? Okay.
I've heard of it.
Okay, South Park is this little neighborhood that was built around the turn of the century. And it's between 3rd and 4th, between 3rd and 2nd going north, and between Bryant and Brennan going to the east. And it's just this little enclave of all these little houses and buildings, some retail in there, it's now a lot of businesses. And it's got a big park in the middle of a road that goes around it. Now, it's very pleasant. I first saw it back in the 60s when I worked down there. It's very nice. It's improved significantly since then. But she's had an idea to do that for a community center to growth.
Pat Eklund?
Pat Eklund, yeah.
South Park in San Francisco?
She wanted to build South Park on Redwood Highway. Because look at what is happening on Redwood Highway. And it's got that nice intersection. I don't think it's...
Redwood Highway or Redwood Avenue?
Redwood Highway. Look at the big...
frontage road.
Median. The MIG median.
That's on Redwood.
At Grant.
At Grant. The bus interchange that just opened.
That's in...
Redwood
you know,
Avenue.
I remember that was always, you coming back from the lake, you spend an hour and a half just to get through Novato. But that... my point is not whether she builds that or not. My point is that she's thinking in terms of how do we benefit the people that live in this town and keep the character of Novato for the people that live in Novato. Yeah. I look at some of the changes that have gone on Grant Avenue over the past 35, 40 years, and it's much different now. And I think it's far more people-friendly than it was when I first came up here.
I just thought of a possible explanation for Pat. I think she walks the fine line and harnesses those that are frustrated with government as being one that, although she's part of government herself, she's willing to challenge government orthodoxy, and a lot of people love that. She has a lot of strong supporters.
She wants to solve the problem.
But it also earns her a lot of enmity. A lot of people think, why isn't she going along with the rest of the crowd? Well, she says, I understand that I will attract some detractors, and I welcome those detractors, or words to that effect. I saw in one of her campaign
one of the issues,
questionnaires.
Greg, and I think you and I went around this some years ago, we have a different way of solving the problem. You don't follow necessarily orthodoxy. I don't follow orthodoxy. I look at what is the problem, what is it that we need to get done for this situation, and let's find a solution. Orthodox people say, this is what we do, how we solve that problem, no matter what the problem is. She doesn't do that. And that's why I like her approach.
Well, they'll both win, and it doesn't really matter who comes in first, although I think they both would love to come in and be the top vote getter for bragging rights. But
for the benefit of the citizens, both of them are going to win. Both of them are going to do a good job for the citizens. Who comes in first is an ego stroke for whoever wants to take it.
The third guy is running kind of as an outsider. He is a local guy, but he's not done a whole lot. And I'm not sure he's ready for prime time, even though his campaign's being run by a friend of mine. I don't think he's ready, and I don't think he can have the money or the endorsements and get his message out and has a chance of winning. But So we'll see the incumbents reelected, as we will in most every other city. Probably Fairfax, as I mentioned, definitely Novato, as I mentioned. San Anselmo also has 2 incumbents running for reelection for 3
Boy,
seats,
they've got
Kay
a
Coleman
tough
and John
problem.
Wright.
These guys really
Flooding.
have a big
Indeed,
problem.
indeed. And of the 3 new candidates, Brian Colbert running for the first time, new to town. Tom King has not been attending a couple of candidates forums I've seen. Steve Burdo, though, is running for the second time, very active, very knowledgeable, former campaign consultant himself. Now he works for the County of Contra Costa as a communications officer. Terrific guy, good guy, and I think he'll grab that 3rd seat, Steve Burdo in San Anselmo. No contest in Santa Fe, just like Larkspur, even though they're on the ballot. That leaves the 2 special races in Sausalito and Tiburon. Susan Cleveland Knowles won the endorsement of the Democratic Party and the Marin Women's Political Action Committee, although Melissa Blaustein has some interesting things about her, running hard. Her campaign manager is the son of Sausalito City Councilwoman Jill Hoffman, which is sort of interesting. He's a high school student. But that sort of tells you which side she's on. So there's a side that includes Jill Hoffman and Linda Pfeiffer, and the other side includes the 2 other guys. And Melissa Blaustein, I think, tries and wants and maybe thinks she'll be independent, but I think there's some fear that she's a little bit on one side, as is Bill Werner.
When I don't know any of these people. I dealt with Sausalito some years ago, sold a number of pieces of commercial real estate and some land development that I did down there. And they went this way and this way and this way and this way. I look at Bill Werner and knowing what his background is, he's got ideas and formula to solve the problem. He mentions ferry landing, that's going to be an issue. Marinship, I don't know what he's got for Marinship. It'd be a nice place to redevelop for housing because there is some vacancy in the office down there in the old recording studio. I'd like to understand what's going to go on with that.
Yeah.
But you can't build high-rise housing.
No.
Maybe 2 stories at best, because if you build anything more than that, you're going to have interfering with people's views.
I agree.
I like the idea of a guy like him that brings kind of a common sense. How do we solve the problem way? As an architect, I'm partial to architects. My father was an architect. And the process of thinking to get a problem solved without creating a big pile of negatives. And that always has appealed to me.
And he's an architect, Bill Werner?
He's an architect, yeah.
Interesting. I know almost nothing about him. He didn't appear at the 2 candidates forums I went to for the 2 countywide organizations, but that's probably because he's a Republican. But I don't know anything positive or negative about him because of that, and it's a nonpartisan race, and there's good reasons for that.
Yeah,
and
I don't
sometimes
look at-
Republicans get elected,
Yeah.
and sometimes they're good. I can name a few. But it is ironic that he is the only Republican out of 30, 35 people running in all the city council
Yes,
races.
yes, one Republican.
Bill Werner and Sausalito.
Well, we're 17% of the registered voters in the county.
And
I mean,
dropping quickly. I don't know why, actually.
I do.
Why?
Because you have to put up with people that everybody's a Democrat and they're all blinded by the Democratic line. And when you say you're Republican, they just say all kinds of nasty things.
Okay, there's some truth
Come
to
on,
that. There's some
what
truth
do you
to
mean
that.
some
But
truth to it?
a few decades ago, this was typical Republican country, a wealthy suburb. That was the definition of
Yeah.
Republican country. But Democrats starting to have a slight edge and then a large edge, and now it's a huge edge. It's 3-1 Democratic, and the decline to state people, now called no party preference, have passed up the Republicans. They're like 22 or 3,
Yeah,
and
right.
Republicans down to 17.
Well, a lot of people don't want to get in the argument. A lot of people aren't like me. I'll just stand around and duke it out. But a lot of people won't. They don't want to do that, and I can understand that.
The 3 of us were at a lunch yesterday with the head of the Republican Central Committee, or former head of the Republican Central Committee, head of the Democratic Central Committee, had a debate, Marin Coalition. And Kevin Crick sounds like a nice guy, and Paul Cohen, the head of the Republican Democratic Party, says so. But I don't think he said much substantive.
He in the beginning he did. I'm sorry that he didn't hammer on a couple of things that I think he should have. And Paul said a couple of things that were absolutely wrong. But, I like Kevin, I like Paul, I've known Paul, and I've known Paul for a long, long time. I even gave him a chance to speak at a meeting one time when he was running for the city council, because I think he did good for the city of San Rafael.
Yep. As he
And
said,
he wasn't partisan when he was
Correct.
doing. He wasn't partisan in what he was doing.
As he said a couple days ago, he says during his entire 16 years on the Santa Fe City Council, he sat right next to a dear, dear friend of his who happened to be a lifelong Republican, and it never caused a problem for either of them ever. And they both probably voted similarly on virtually everything and did the best they could for the city of Santa Fe, and their political party was irrelevant.
Because it wasn't partisan.
Right.
And therein one of the benefits of local politics, and when I don't look at these things, we're looking at what do we do within the city to solve the problems that the city has, which is the benefit and reason for local government.
They were extremely civil to each other, as I like to think you and I are, although we get heated sometimes because that's our personalities, but not angry at each other. But speaking of being partisan, we're going to run out of time here, and we do want to get to the White House. The last race is Tiburon. The only one I've heard was Holly Thier at the 2 countywide candidates forums I mentioned, and she's one of the 2 appointed incumbents. Seems very good. She was actually very involved in San Francisco and was the head of the League of Women Voters there, and was on the Democratic Central Committee and a delegate to the State Democratic Party, and sounds terrific. She moved into Tiburon a few years ago, and now she's getting involved in Tiburon politics, so great. And the other guy, David Kulik, I know nothing good or bad about. The other appointed incumbent, and Jack Ryan, I know absolutely nothing about. So that's Tiburon. But let's talk about the White House. Anything happening in the White House? Nah, nothing's happening in the White House. So there's always happening in the White House. What is it with that guy? He comes into office with the lowest approval ratings of anyone ever, probably. They're dropping, not far and fast, but not as far and fast as I would have thought. They actually went up recently. I'm not sure why. But it seems like every day is a controversy between tweeting and insulting foreign leaders and causing major problems, not earning any friends or influence in Congress, and not getting any legislation passed. Tell me what you think. Well,
He's not getting legislation passed because of McConnell, who's really thwarting him. His campaign was, I'm going to drain the swamp. And as we were talking outside this room a couple hours ago, the problem is that there are too many people that are living off the largesse of the government and all the lobbyists. And for somebody to come in and say, I'm going to challenge your right to take this money and going to get rid of you, well, hey, you've been living like a king for a long time. You don't want to give that up. And it doesn't make any difference what party you're in.
I agree. It's a nonpartisan issue.
You know, he's not a partisan guy when it comes to that. He wants to clean up the government.
Candidates often say they want to drain the swamp. Has he done so? He's appointed a bunch of multi-millionaire businessmen.
Whoa. That's got nothing to do with what is his appointment are people that have been very successful in business.
But they have no government experience.
Well, government is a business, Craig. Unfortunately, it's just a big business now.
Business experience doesn't always translate into success in government, as Donald Trump is seeing better than anybody. We have a lot of...
Greg, I would like it if you'd just let me talk.
Didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah. He's appointed people that have been very successful in getting things done. I remember when Trump's first book came out, one of the guys I shared an office with read the book and said, oh, man, so what'd you think? He said, he's full of himself.
Part of the deal.
So I said, okay, I got to read that book. I did. And I said, you're right, he's full of himself. But he gets things done. And he's gotten a tremendous amount done. Is it good or bad? Yeah, it's all, everybody has made money with Donald Trump. And he's built a lot of properties. You don't have to like it.
Oh, are you talking about his business career?
I'm talking about his business. Now he's in there, he's gotten rid of an awful lot of regulations. One that I'm very, very happy that got rid of is waters of the United States. Now, I don't know how familiar you are with the EPA. The Clean Water Act of 1972 created the EPA. Mm-hmm. And they were a good idea. Let's clean up these rivers. We had a big fire in the river. Hey, that's not good. Lake Michigan was dirty, Erie was dirty, all these waterways were dirty. So the EPA was created to clean this up. EPA has gotten ahead of itself. The EPA was an agency created by statute. Now they are creating regulations that have the full force and effect of law, but you and I as citizens have no recourse to whatever they do. And they have now started taking property from people. Mm-hmm. Waters of the United States was their attempt. The Clean Water Act and the EPA was created to clean up the navigable waterways. But navigable was never completely defined. So they took on any water, and they wanted to get the Clean Water Act. They tried to get it through. The Senate was against them, 53 to 44. The Senate voted against it, but they kept pushing ahead. It's a bureaucracy. They just kept doing it. Teamed up with the Army Corps of Engineers. they're now taking people's property rights away. Now, property rights are enshrined in the Constitution, the 3rd, 4th, and 5th Amendment, which specifically states the government, the sovereign, can take private property for public use, but must pay just compensation. There's dozens of cases. I'll just give you one. Duarte, a farmer up in Tehama County, hired a contractor to come in and plow up 750 acres of his land so he could plant winter wheat. He raises cranberries and pistachios and various other things. Now we're going to put winter wheat on it. The EPA came in and said, no, there were vernal pools on your land. You know what a vernal pool is? Created when it rains. When it's not raining, there's no pool. They said it's a waterway. They sued him. He sued back. They came back and doubled down on the suit to $45 million. He had to give in. He paid them $330,000 in penalties, and he had to pay $700,000 in wetlands mitigation fees in order to do this. And why did he give in? He says, I can't afford to put all these people and my family in jeopardy and out of work.
It does sound wrong, and vernal pools don't sound like navigable waters. So
Well,
I
you
don't know,
remember
I don't know
the
that
sin-
case.
Well, that's just one. I'm just pointing out one. The point I'm making is not the case, but the fact that this agency has gotten into the habit of taking people's lands. You remember the Nolan case in the Coastal Commission? Nolan wanted to develop his family's vacation home on the coast into a permanent residence. He got a permit to do it. But the Coastal Commission said, yeah, we'll let you do it, but in order for you to use this permit, you have to dedicate all of your beach area to public use. I'm sorry, but that's not right. He sued, he won, the appellate court overturned the lawsuit and sided with the commission. He then teamed up with the Pacific Legal Foundation, took it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, you cannot take somebody's land away or charge them a fee unless that fee is to mitigate some harm or damage they are doing to the public. He wasn't doing any harm or damage or anything to the public. So he won in the Supreme Court.
How long ago was that?
That was 30 years ago, 25 years ago.
Wow.
Well, that sounds like a good.
So the issue becomes one of how many of these regulations and agencies are getting in the way of things going on in our country. I just named you two. There are Willibird right up here. The county of Marin, right here in our own little county, has said Willibird wants to build a house. Benedetti, he's the guy that owns Willibird Turkeys.
That's in Sonoma County, isn't it?
No, it's in Marin County. His farm is in Marin County.
Okay.
Willie-Bird's Turkeys is on Santa Rosa Avenue,
right.
that restaurant
That's
up
what I
there.
was thinking of.
Yeah,
Willie-Bird Turkey.
but he sells thousands, tens of thousands of turkeys every Thanksgiving and Christmas. Anyway, he wants to build a home. He's getting older and wanted to retire and enjoy time with his grandkids. He wanted to build a home on his land. The county said, oh yeah, you have to give us a portion of your land. If you're going to build it, you have to stay in farming. You can't quit farming. If you do, we're going to take your land away. I don't know the details of the case.
Me
I just
neither.
know that that's the case. Where did these agencies get off interfering with private property? I'm big. You may have noticed I'm real big on private property rights.
Well, those are good examples, and if they're as you state, and I don't have any reason to think that they're not, they may well be an example of exactly what you say, government overreaching, government overregulation. But as a Democrat who generally believes in government, and as I said, leveling the playing field, I would probably venture to guess that for every one of those, there's probably 10 more where the government made the right decision.
That's a
where the
made-up
EPA
number.
made the
You
right
don't
decision.
have that.
You're right, it's a made-up number.
Yeah.
But I think that...
So don't start using numbers if you don't have a fact.
When I say 10 times, I assume you knew I was guessing and hyperbole. But
Well, yeah, but there's a whole bunch of people out there that say, hey, he said 10 times.
Well.
And as we talked before this meeting, the young man that's running this show, this camera said, people are getting wrapped up in half statements. They don't have critical thinking. So somebody that is personable, such as yourself, makes a statement. He looks honest. He's wearing glasses. He's got a tie. He's got gray hair,
Yeah,
a
he
little
looks
bald.
honest.
This guy has a little gravitas for them
Oh,
to
I
believe what he
trust
says.
him. Yeah,
and so
right,
he
yeah,
says
right.
10
Okay.
times and people believe it.
let me rephrase that.
So let's be careful.
As Democrats, and I've studied this issue carefully, like thousands of hours, overall, cumulatively, all issues, including environmental protection, on which I'm on several boards, I believe that the EPA has done a good job and is a good thing, and it's a shame that Trump appointed Scott Pruitt, the former Oklahoma Attorney General, who made his bones suing the EPA.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
You don't agree with that?
Not at all. As a matter of fact, I think that's the best thing to happen to the public, to the private property owners of the United States. I just gave you 2 cases about the EPA and how they've totally overstepped what they were supposed to be doing. And there are cases throughout this country of the same thing. So they overreach. Do you want to let that continue on? As a Democrat even, do you want to let that happen?
I admitted that there are undoubtedly some cases where the government overreached, but I do
There's
question your
hundreds of cases, and I can show you those cases.
I believe those are the exception rather than the rule. Why do you?
Whoa. How can they be the exception if there are so many?
How do you know there are hundreds? You probably read
because no,
Pacific
that
Legal
came
Foundation.
from the Pacific Legal
I
Foundation.
was just going to say Pacific Legal Foundation, well-known conservative Republican think
No,
tank.
they're private property rights.
Right.
They're not a political organization.
Oh, they're extremely political organization. Extremely.
Oh
political.
yeah, because they believe in private property. I'm sorry. I
No,
forgot private property is a Republican.
They
Yeah.
take highly charged political cases. I don't know how you could be more political than the Pacific Legal Foundation. Yes, they believe in private property rights.
And so they fight for it. Does that make them partisan? Or it does make them partisan that they fight for what I believe in, and I happen to be a Republican believing in private property rights, then they're partisan.
That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying anything worse than that. Republicans tend to believe this. Democrats tend to believe this.
Yeah, you want to
Sometimes
take
not a lot of
people's
overlap.
private property for public
No,
good.
we don't.
You just said you want to redistribute it.
Well, I'm just saying some redistribution has always happened, will always happen, and is inevitable. And I believe it's for the public good, and I believe it will prevent a revolution, which you said we're getting awfully close to revolution because there's so many poor people. Maybe we need more redistribution.
Yeah, who made the poor people?
Why are you blaming the Democrats for that?
Well, let me just look at what our national debt was 10 years ago, and it's doubled since then. It took 240 years to get to 10 trillion, and then it took 8 years to get to 20 trillion.
We got to go in a few minutes, but I'm so glad you brought up the national debt. Every once in a while, the newspaper prints a chart of every president the last 20, 30, 40 years and how they increased the national debt. And only one president has reduced it.
Look what happened. Yes.
Well,
yes, they did.
In Barack Obama's case, there was a good reason for that. George W. Bush took the economy into the toilet. It was tanking. We got
it's George's fault.
major bankruptcies. If Barack Obama hadn't done what he did, and John and McCain agreed with him.
Let us look at the history of that, and let's go back to Jimmy Carter, who started the Community Reinvestment Act that got rid of redlining and told lenders, savings and loans, that you have to make loans in these areas even though the people are not qualified to make the loans. Now, if you follow that through the next few years, you come up to, we had this big fallout in the 80s. They created the Resolution Trust Corporation. The Resolution Trust Corporation tried to sell, they took over all these failed properties from the savings and loan. They wanted to resell the properties. The problem was there was no money in the system. So where did the money come from to buy this? Do you know?
No.
Have you heard of collateralized mortgage-backed securities?
Yes, that's what caused the crash, the huge crash.
Well,
in 2008.
no, that isn't what caused the crash. What caused the crash was, did you go see the movie Short?
I've seen it.
Okay.
And several other documentaries on that same subject.
And the whole thing was, all of a sudden, you've got a chance to sell this. And there's A, B, and C paper. I'm going to buy A paper and pay a certain amount of money for it. If there's B paper, I want a higher return. If there's C paper, I want a higher return yet. Well, they mixed them all together. Now, if I owe her money and she owes you money, and I don't pay her, she can't pay you. You have a problem. She has a problem. And the guy that you owe money to has a problem. Well, that's what happened. A whole bunch of people stopped paying because people were borrowing money. I remember sitting in realtors meetings, guys had come in, lenders, saying, I can get you 105% of the property for a loan. 105%? That's insane. If I have no skin in the game, what is my risk of loss?
I agree. Blatantly fraudulent brokers giving liars loans to people that said, just sign the bottom, I'll make sure you get your loan.
That's
And
right.
people
And there's
willingly-
no responsibility. Those people
agree.
did not go to jail, and every
I
damn
agree.
one of them should have
I
gone
agree.
to jail.
And there's some guilt to the borrowers too, saying, oh, you'll get me a loan and I don't have to fill out anything. Oh, sure, I'll let you do that, knowing that they don't have the income to qualify to pay for the mortgage that they just signed up for.
Greg, we'll never get rid of the venal nature of some people that are called humans.
Yes. Now,
Well,
back to your 47%.
We've just got about 1 minute left,
Yes,
gentlemen,
all right,
and
but-
I think
but-
we've really centered on a lot of things
Yeah.
here, so go ahead,
I want
finish
to go
your
back to
idea
your
here.
47% of the people are on some kind of government assistance, a figure made famous by Mitt Romney 5 years ago when he was running for president. I hope you're not including Social Security in that.
I am.
That's
Because
not
you
government
wouldn't.
assistance. That's people's money that they put into it from their own earnings.
Well, how come the government doesn't treat it that way? And
They
how
should.
come- They should, but they
I
don't.
resent it when it's called an entitlement. I thought you and I agreed on that one. It's not an entitlement. It's you.
No, it isn't an entitlement.
Good. So they shouldn't count that in the 47%, should they?
I'm not going to argue that it's government money coming back to the people. It's not an entitlement.
Government money because the government required that you contribute it to a fund and then they give it back to you when you retire.
Yeah, except now they tax it. Because of your guy, Bill Clinton.
Bill Clinton's
It was
responsible for
set up.
taxing Social Security?
Yes, Bill Clinton is the guy that put the tax on Social Security. You know, when Roosevelt set it up, two things. One, this is not to be used for identification purposes. But one of the things that I've heard he said in the back room is we now have a national identification number, which is what it's being used for. I got my first Social Security card in big red type on that card. It said not to be used for identification. Now, what's your primary identification?
The Social Security number.
Yeah. And should it have been taxed?
Well, I think the idea was that during your working years, you're making a lot of money, you're paying a high level of tax. In your retirement years, you're going to get Social Security, you're going to get a lower level of income, and it'll be taxed at a lower level.
No, it wasn't going to be taxed at all. It wasn't taxed at all. And now it's being taxed. You know, that it's a different argument. The point is that these things change. Nothing is static, and it's always changing. You know, I was at a meeting the other day. Oh, wait a minute. It was Paul that indicated we should maybe only have one party.
I don't recall that. At the meeting a couple days ago?
Yeah, at that lunch.
Maybe because Democrats outnumber Republicans 3-1 in Marin?
Well, no, statewide.
Oh. Well, it's true
But
that we
there were
occupied
other
all the
people-
statewide elected
Look,
officials the last 10 years.
I wouldn't want only Republicans running it, and I wouldn't want only Democrats. I think that we have to have one of the things that our founders worried about were factions. And unfortunately, that's what we have now. We have so many factions. Black Lives Matter in this group and that group and the other group, and they're all fighting each other. And we're losing the sight of what this country was about, freedom and liberty. And that concerns me.
Good point.
Not what you and I go through, because we're sensible. Most of us are trying to get our idea across. I may agree with you on some things. You may agree with me on some things. But as long as we rationally discuss it, we're running out of rational people.
Well,
They're
we're
just
running out of
screaming and
rational
yelling.
time too here,
Yes.
Mr. Wilkinson. We've got to give the station back to, or give the time back to the station.
No, let's
here.
hijack the station, keep it permanently.
They get their cameras back.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So I want to thank Greg Brockbank and Jack Wilkinson, and we're going to have a show after the election so we can see just who was going in the right direction here.
Greg,
So-
And
It's
say the
always-
latest hijinks of Donald Trump in the White House.
So for Public Advocate, thank you. Bye-bye.